Hello everybody, welcome to our live webinar. So as always, we're going to talk about some 3ds Max stuff, and we're also going to talk about your work. So this time I'm going to take the back seat, and I'm going to be talking about your work for, this time, because obviously it is going to be a review. And we kind of expanded because a lot of you sent us exteriors, and I think that since it was supposed to be interior review and we've got so many images from interiors and exteriors, it would be a shame not to really talk about that. So those of you that just joined in, welcome. This is a VizAcademy live stream where we will be talking about your work. So that means work of people that sent us a few of their renders for a little bit of a review. And what kind of review are we talking about? I'm going to talk about similar situations that we have during our lessons. And what kind of lessons? Well, those of you that don't know, VizAcademy is a rendering school that will teach you how to create beautiful renders in less than 7 weeks. So if you want to join, please make sure to visit VizAcademy Co. UK. Because we've got hundreds of images from you guys, and a lot of them are quite amazing, I cannot really go over each and every image that you've sent, but we picked a few of them to talk about your work, to give you some feedback, because I think it's going to be easy for everybody to go over and have a little bit of a conversation about your work. So guys, if you see your work in during our webinar, please let us know in the chat. Also, hello Shazim, Adverticum, Christina, Kamaldeep, welcome. Nice to see you. Chimidia, also Toon, Ninja Swords, welcome everybody. So let's get started. So first work that we selected, and by selection I really mean that we were kind of blindly picking images to not hurt anybody's feelings, because obviously all of your renders were very nice quality, but there are some elements that we can work on, and I'm going to try to give you some tips, some review, and obviously we're going to also see what we can do to improve. Can I send you my project render now, Facebook now? Unfortunately, no. We were allowing that for a week, and if you haven't, I won't be able to read it because right now I'm in a studio and I won't be able to really get into it. Hi, how are you? Thank you, I'm fine, and how are you? So guys, first thing first, what kind of software do you work in? And we don't have a lot of information on this image rather than just it was created by Ali Haider. So we're going to talk about this image and its, let's say, best and worst qualities. So this image is a typical situation for ArcViz where you will be adding a lot of portfolio shots and you want them to look nice and fancy, but they also need to make sense, and in some cases that element can be really forget about in place of actually making something look nice. The first thing that really strikes me in this image, and I'm going to say I'm going to talk about good stuff and the bad stuff in all of your images. So the first thing is the composition. I like it. It's very clean, it's easy to read, the colors are very vibrant, and there are some elements that we absolutely have to take notice. One element that is really going to be a huge problem is the noise level. You cannot deliver your shots on such high noise levels because this is not going to look like photographic or let's say video grain. It's just noise, and this is not going to be the right way of approaching your images if you want to be seen as a professional. Next thing is going to be probably a little bit of a contentious topic, but the background. In this case, it not only doesn't fit pixel wise to the main image, but also the wall is just so small yet so close that it just screams artificial. A good example that I've prepared for you guys is was done by some of our students. So for example, we've got work by Roberta, and Roberta was able to add background in the right way. So we've got a little bit of depth, we've got lower levels of noise, and also as vibrant colors. So this reads a little bit better because now we kind of have a bit of a planar shot where we understand that this was supposed to be nice, deep, and it was supposed to be an image that you kind of dream about. But once you have a brick wall behind you, 5 meters, and with tiny windows, it kind of blows the effect. So in this case, I would say that it is really good, but that one element is lacking. Next element that I think needs a little bit more attention is mostly the water. Although you can use very strong bump, you should work a little bit more on the map that you're using. In our case, Lindsay was able to add almost a strong bump, but what's going to be important in most of the cases when you will be working on your images is that you should always take into consideration that water should have volume and water should have levels. And although this is, well, very nicely done water, it's just too reflective, it looks plastic, and the bump is made out of geometry, not exactly a map. So this brings us to a point where some elements looks like abstract art, and when we zoom in on Lindsay's work, you cannot really see the same type of abstraction. It's realism, and this is something that your image currently lacks. Also, since we've got this building in our background, there should be some kind of hint that this is also supposed to be reflected in that water. Also, what we can talk about is the curtains. Although I'm not going to be talking about the design because design is very soft, let's say it's up to you. But if all of the white-ish colors are getting tinted with this yellow, which is coming almost seemingly out of nowhere, we should always, or at least expect, that the same levels of white that we have on all of the pictures and all the furniture is going to be also on our curtains. And right now the curtains stand out so much that I'm not really sure what the topic of this shot would be. Very nice work, and I must say that the lamp looks especially appealing. So this is something that definitely your clients enjoyed looking at. So if you are in our chat, let me know what type of work this was. Was it a portfolio project, or was it a paid project, or just a little bit of fun for the university you're attending? Oh, by the way, next thing is adding details to your windows. Although for the most part you don't need to do a lot, adding just some of it is going to be crucial for some images. If we again jump into our students' work, for example, Raimondo, you can see that all the whites are following and the curtains are actually tinted the same way. The background, although it's also a brick wall, it's the right scale, it's closer, and the pixel-wise it matches. So good job, Raimondo. In many cases, when you will be working with images, you want to always have a little bit of detail in your window. Just a bit, doesn't have to be a lot. Just that one line would really make a difference. And well, in this case, I would say that Ali was our first contestant, and it went really well. I love your image. So please make sure to send us more work in the future, because we will be making this type of reviews in in the future as well. Hello from Georgia. Hello, how can I send you the render? Vivek, we unfortunately cannot accept more renders, although I will be able to probably look at them right after our webinar. The link is posted in the video description, so you might want to check if that works for you. And well, meanwhile, we're going to be looking at images sent by different people. So Caramello Manica. We've got this image, and again, remember that we weren't picking those images, we were randomly selecting them. So this is not some kind of particular topic to rag on somebody, to tell them that they're wrong, but really it's to help you improve your skills and to make sure that you understand that our students are also starting from, let's say, beginner level, and 75% of our students will be starting from level that we can see here, or even lower, because 75% of the people that we deal with is actually working from absolute beginner level, which is really highly appreciated because we don't need to work with bad habits. At the same time, we also have some professionals in our work, and if any of you guys from our group is currently online, let me know. So guys, what software do you use? I would like to really hear about that, because you came to our webinar for a reason, and that reason might be really important for us. So this image by Carmelo is really looking good, but we've got some elements that I kind of dislike. The first thing that you're going to see in many renders is that the cars are going to be semi-levitating, and you can see that although it kind of touches the ground, it also levitates a little bit, because only one tire is touching the ground, rest is almost in the air. So this is just a common problem with many renders when you will be working with some kind of imagery. You may kind of forget to align to other elements. Tender Nation, 3ds Max for life, I guess. Yes, 3ds Max is my software of choice, but I am also learning more software on a daily basis, because you have to get better. Okay, so this image has a lot of very good elements in it. So it's vibrant, the design is very easy to read, but we have to take into account that whenever we want to use greens, and especially if it's so close to the camera, we absolutely must work with quality. Next thing that I would be pointing towards is the greens. In some cases, using lower quality 3D models is just not going to cut it. And here you can see that the geometry is just not so good. They're a little bit too dark, and that makes this image a little bit blunt. For example, Craig, our student, was able to create very similar image in my eyes, but what you need to always take into consideration that your scatters need to be vibrant, that you need a lot of life in them, and one thing that's really going to be the difference between night and day is variety, not only in your terrain but also in the scattered objects. You want to have some kind of form of rocks, pebbles, maybe a few twigs, and occasionally maybe some weed, because that's going to also have a lot of impact on your render. Whenever we work with trees, you want to make sure that the trees that you're working with are high quality, that you don't have any kind of rogue polygons just let's say hanging there broken like this, because that's too close to your camera. If you think that your model is lower quality, I would recommend instead not adding this tree and adding this in Photoshop from a photo even. There's nothing wrong with adding an element from a photo, because that would absolutely indicate that it's going to be higher quality. Also, what's not very often looked upon is the horizon line. We need to understand that each of your images is going to have its own unique horizon line, and in this case we can calculate that with following our vanishing lines, the horizon line is pretty much going to be somewhere out here, because that's going to be the level that I would be going for, and some of the light is poking from below the horizon line, and this is going to be something that you always need to take into consideration, that that's a mistake. Because if we allow this light to shine through the way it does, it is just not going to cut it. You need to fill this background a little bit further in both cases. Even if this building is on a hill, you would see more detail. The sky is fantastic. we've got beautiful reflections and the textures are fine. Although some of the detail is missing on this part of the fence, but it's still going to look nice. Apart from everything, the biggest problem with this image is really the grass. So I would say that even though I'm not grading those images, this image is very close to being beautiful, but I would say it's closer to 6 out of 10 because the model and the overall composition is fine. We just need to work on a little bit more, a little bit stronger light. And especially when it comes to grass that's closer to our camera, just go crazy, add some detail, go with the flow, make sure that it's going to actually make sense. Because if you take into consideration that you want to work with nice gradients from darker to brighter and going up towards the main image or main building, it is going to work on your behalf. So this is going to be easier to read for all of your future viewers. And that's going to be something that this is something that Ronan really understood well. So congratulations to you too. Let's move on to the next shot because we've got something by Eduardo. So Eduardo Fabroni has sent us this beautiful image. I must say that you can clearly see that this is work by a professional, and there's a lot of things that you have to take into consideration when working on such piece. I would say that yes, this is very highly professional work, although I know that this was actually done for some kind of contest or a college, let's say, work, because there's a lot of things that suggest that it must be. Okay, how to create an aluminum kinetic facade is shaken by the wind. How to create, please? Moin, that's not going to be possible during this webinar, but you can send those questions to our Instagram and maybe we will make that happen during one of the live webinars, or maybe even a short info, but it's actually super simple. I would love to do that. So 1 cent, would it be possible to give me some constructive feedback? Unfortunately, at the moment, we're not going to be accepting more images for feedback. You had your chance already, but we're going to do it next time. So please be on the lookout because we really want to help you guys improve your skills, and it's going to be lovely, but I cannot promise I'm going to be able to reply to all of you. So you can send it. I'm not going to ignore it, but I'm not sure if I'm going to really see it because we've got plenty of applications. Georgia, was that restaurant render yours? I don't think so. Purchase and render. I just changed basic info. Donation restaurant was not mine. Okay, I sent small kitchen. Hope it will appear. Georgie, I also hope it will. Have you done this course? Well, I did do the course. D5 or Lumion? Which one do you prefer? I would say that at the moment I would definitely gravitate towards D5 render because that kind of, it's fresh. I love that it works with Unreal Engine. And let's get back to the topic. I'm going to get back to your questions in a few minutes. Remember guys that during our training we also talk about composition and every detail that is related to it. So let's talk about what we have here and what really strikes me as a little bit problematic. So definitely this building, the idea and the overall structure is not something to really ignore. This is everything about this image is really looking good, although the problem at the moment is that there's a little bit of texture repetition that shouldn't be really possible in real life, that we don't want to even have in most of our cases. And this also shows on the frontal facade, so it only means that you don't know how to use randomization on your images. Also, everything else is a little bit stiff, so this being metallic, you probably want to add a little bit different corrosion on all of the elements. Also around edges or just a little bit of wear and tear here and there would be extremely great. But we then have this situation where you've added a few people that are 3D and they're rendered in, but some of them are pasted in and rendered in because we've got some kind of shiny elements that aren't supposed to be there. But the biggest problem is, for example, those time travelers that are seemingly leprechauns, because not only they're smaller, but also they don't fit in this case. You probably had a problem with those two people, that they looked a little bit too neutral or bland, and because of that you've decided to paste in Photoshop something extra, and that is really going to be a big problem for a lot of renders. So there's going to be some situations where adding people is a good idea, but please make sure to at least add a little bit better masking when adding elements. My suggestion for you in many cases would be to approximate a 3D model for an object like this, add a little bit of thickness, and then place it on the ground, because right now the way you integrated this lovely couple is not really going to work out. So if you want their relationship to last, you definitely need to take care of their masking, because otherwise they won't look good together. So what I want to say really here is that people that are so close to our camera not only should have the proper scale, because if we think about this guy sitting and then they're almost at the same level, those two people are extremely tiny. Then we have the same situation with those, and the scale differences are really going to be the downside of this image, and it kind of blows the effect. Next thing, composition wise, is the trees. We got a lot of trees that are, well, let's say lower quality, and they're too close to our view, and you can kind of see that, especially on those leaves, you just need some kind of textures. There's no way to not have a texture when the object is so close to your camera, and something that a lot of beginners do. I know that this is not a beginner's work, but this is the one and only proof that this is a college or contest work, because in real life you don't add the birds. This is something that a lot of my students, where they're starting, think you have to add in. I even seen a blimp in one of the renders, but no, you don't add the birds. It's not really going to be a good idea. Instead of focusing on adding those in, please focus more on the background, because background, whenever it's going to be that blurred out compared to the rest of your image, it is going to create a little bit unrealistic effect, which is just not going to be good. So I would say it is really important for us to always have those backgrounds taken care of. And last but not least is the coloring, because we need to make sure that our composition is going to be more or less fitting. You don't want to grab random colors that are out of nowhere and just oversaturate them until they almost look good, because that's going to be something that will focus too much attention and take away the weight from your main image. Another good example of grass would be on this image by Matthew Alexandra. You can see that the trees have a way higher quality. We've got some elements that have a little bit better composition, and one very important thing is that the color scheme overall is fitting. So what it means is that all the elements fit one another. So we've got pairs, and no matter where you zoom in, it looks like a separate image, a separate picture, because it just works. And in your case, if we zoom in on some certain areas, it just doesn't. So you have to take into consideration that the composition needs to be full. And the next thing, but this is just my subjective opinion, you never add any kind of object that would be obscuring what is really important. You need to make a little bit of a margin, so the main object is going to be the main object. If you ever allow your main object to be obscured by anything during your render, it only means that that wasn't the main object to begin with. So that's going to be part of the background because it's behind something. So you never want to allow that, otherwise you're going to run into that kind of good vibe, but not yet. Is my visualization gonna review I sent earlier? Asim, it all depends if it was selected, and I cannot really tell you if it's going to be, because we weren't looking at the names when we were selecting those images, so I cannot really promise you that, but I'm going to try to highlight all of the images that we can. Please review, sir. If it's going to be possible, bad dream, I will try to. As any of you done the 7 weeks program, I want some feedback for total beginners. Kevin, if you want some feedback, I would recommend you to go to our Instagram and talk to our former students, because they will give you the best review they can. And not because we asked them to, but they experienced it and they know what VizAcademy really is. So you're going to have the best possible review. And if there's somebody in our audience that was part of our training, please make sure to also, spoke now or be silent forever. So Claire, so we've got this image. It looks good. Everything about this building is nice, and there are some elements that we always can improve, but there's also some elements that we should think about as let's say possible mistakes. The biggest mistake I can see, and you cannot tell me that it's part of the design, is you absolutely forgotten to even add material to this object. This is common problem actually. A lot of professionals forget about the scope or scale of their scene, and they will have some elements just, well, blue, green, red, out of the blue. And in many cases, this is going to be a huge mistake, but this time I'm going to let it slide, but we're going to be mostly focusing on the background. What I dislike about images like that is we've got this element here. It's white-ish, right? So this is, let's say, white. We've got also this bed, which is also white. But then we've got the clouds, which are darker than a sitting on the sofa. That's not really something I would say is even possible. Our background needs to have a little bit of sharpness, because if we allow this to blur out, it's going to be ruined. So because we can expect that right 3 meters from here, or let's say 1 meter from here, this image is going to have some kind of pull around here. Why not make a little bit, why not move your camera a little bit further, add the pull, and make this shot so much more interesting. This would really add vibrance to your shot, more life. But I understand that you probably were afraid of adding too much, because your render seems to be a little bit empty. Although we've got a lot of good stuff in here, the textures have a little bit inappropriate or wrong levels of displacement. For that reason, some elements are more emphasized and some of them are not. We could say that this is actually how the tiles are supposed to be done, but because of how the levels are really calculated, I would say that this would be a mistake in my eyes. Next thing is the stretch of your texture. We can especially see it here. This texture has very wide texture stretch, while the opposite side just doesn't. And you can see that this, when it's parallel, you can see that it's good, but perpendicular, it's just falling flat. So you have to make sure that the texture that you're adding is not going to be overly stretched. In this case, yes, it works well because our camera is at a little bit more forgiving angle. So in this area, it doesn't even show, but it shows very much in this case. So you either want to hide this element by obscuring it somehow, or just, well, you have to work on the texture. Then we have the floor. I don't know what kind of earthquake we've got here, but definitely those are not steps, although they kind of look like that. People looking at something like this will immediately point this out. We also have a lacking detail on our windows, and the reflections aren't necessarily looking good. The composition is great. The architecture is very nicely shown, and the highlight really was supposed to be the architecture, and I understand that. We absolutely delivered. But if you're going to treat this or use this for marketing purposes, you can't even add the phone number here. So you have to have a little bit wider shot, because your clients are going to regret working with you if they cannot even add it as the simplest info on the image, because you have to give them a little bit of margin, or it's just not going to fly. How long this live is gonna take time? Well, it's going to be approximately 1 hour long, but it depends on how many topics we have, what kind of questions we're going to get. So I think it's going to be, well, something to talk about. I see that somebody is from our training here. Tune is here. Honestly, awesome guidance and support. So if this is the same Tune, I would say that thank you. I'm a student. They were amazing. Jordan, thank you. Please review my render. I sent you that one. If it was selected, we will. What do you think about AI, Mike? Is it some kind of danger for 3D artists, or is it will be helpful for us? I would say that it's the same topic as with architects and CAD software. CAD software is supposed to kill the architecture because now everybody's gonna be an architect. No, because before AI can be really good, you have to know what you want. And I personally don't even know what kind of socks that I want to wear in the morning. So that's why I just bought one pair 20 times. So I don't have to make that decision. And imagine that now you have to spend a lot of money before you build a building, renovate your interior, or just do some kind of product design. You're going to have the same problem. Does it look good? Who's going to tell me that it does? AI is not going to give you opinions, it's going to give you statistics. And when it comes to opinions and being innovative, you have to have a human touch. So AI is going to be a tool for you, not against you. But if it can be used against you, that means that your work was insignificant, or maybe you weren't really good enough to not be replaced. But really, who's going to be replaced by AI? Only people that were creating icons for the internet websites, because that can be generated in seconds. Rest requires a little bit of brains, and you've got this, so I am sure you're not going to be one of those replaced. Jordan dives. Was it great for me? I'm a slow learner and I can keep watching the videos over and over until it clicks. Mike is still there to answer when I'm really stuck. Thank you again, Mike. Thank you, Jordan. That's really nice of you. So thank you for the review. Good to hear. Thanks. I'm trying to learn with different YouTube videos and so on, but it feels like I lack structure. That's exactly what our training really is. It's a structured knowledge that absolutely can be accessed from different sources, but we also made sure that our students get special treatment. So that means that you're going to get special support, 7 days a week, videos that you can rewatch that aren't available on our YouTube. And on top of everything, we have 3 webinars per week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, where we go over your progress, give you tips. I show you some amazing, I hope, tricks in 3ds Max that we're not going to be sharing on our YouTube channel. And yes, it's the best thing you can do, because you can learn how to code, but if you don't have a structured training that somebody else already tried and had success with, you're probably going to waste time. I really bought many trainings for different software, and I was almost always disappointed. So that's why that also inspired us to create VizAcademy, because we just want to put the bar a little bit higher for everybody to be an example of good structure. And this is something that I would shamelessly, but still with honor, recommend you. So join our training right now. Sir, render sent with a name Hasil. If I can see it, we're going to try it. Doing what you are doing right now is one of my actual job. Great. Now I feel I have a friend. George, thank you. That's amazing. Sir, what is the best lighting for the interior scene? The best lighting is the one you're going to add from HDRI, but it all depends on the structure because all interiors are going to be unique, so there's no one answer to that. Is it going to be recorded? Sebastian, yes, everything is going to be recorded, and you will be able to review or revisit your work, our video as soon as you can. I'm going to be heartbroken if my visualization is not going to be reviewed by Mike. I'm going to look for it then because I cannot allow that. Okay, Marcos, now this is your work, and I really love it because this is beautiful design. I love every inch of it, although the render itself is all over the place. There's the lighting is too ambient. You can see that there's a lot of very direct lighting in the back, which wasn't allowed through the ceiling. That's normal. But if we're going to be adding a strong direct lighting, I would actually recommend you to try to add a little bit more structure to your lighting. You must always show us a glimpse of sky, a glimpse of brightness, something that's going to allow us to really feel the contrast between the night and day, black and white, because in your case, we don't even have shadows. This render is very high quality, the models are good, the people are fairly nice quality as well. I especially like the models, they're really great. But the problem is that I don't know what to really look at, because at this point everything is a little bit, let's say, all over the place. Again, the ambience in this room is killing this image. You should add strong, decisive light on one of the sides and make sure to show us more of that sky, more of that brightness, more. Because right now the lights are too clamped and materials just seem to fall flat. And because of that, we're going to be focusing more on the people that are not really, let's say, bad quality, but you can see the pixels here. So that's not something I would like in my render. The plants are fantastic, but again, whenever you work with some kind of flooring that's going to be as unique as this, please make sure to add some kind of light that's going to be even randomly added, but it is going to add some kind of reflection, because otherwise this is again going to be a texture, not a floor. Also, some mistakes that are impossible to avoid in some cases, but whenever they are so close to your camera, you kinda even subconsciously will notice them, because some of the plants are just growing through the elements. This is not to again tell you that you did something wrong, but whenever objects are so close to your camera, you have to work on the quality. You cannot just add a plant and say done, because if the plant is lower than expected quality compared to the rest of the image, for example, this plant, photorealistic, this element alone, photorealistic, this guy, well, Sims. Then we've got a gaming, let's say gaming engine quality plant, which again is good, but not good enough because the rest of your image is way higher. Also, bloom and glare in the back is not necessary. We've got some reflection in many cases, but we should have more of it, because the contrast is going to be the key to your success. And this image is really great, but I would appreciate more contrast and more lighting, because in your case, we want to make sure that your work is going to be well, closer to what Ilona has created, our student, and in the past. So very important whenever you work with very unique plants is that you have to work with the quality. And also, even though we don't see a lot of background here, it's not really important, because at the moment it's burning out, or let's say close to burning through the plants, and that is why we can see that it's higher quality. every surface has reflection, and that also highlights the texture because we can see the contrast, and that's something that I would strongly recommend to you. Okay, Adrian, in this case, the render is fantastic. Everything about the model is good, although we have to point the obvious. First thing first is our anti-aliasing. You are over sharpening your images, and that's why we have artifacts like that. This won't fly, and this is the resolution you sent us, so I'm guessing that this is also the resolution that you're sending to your client. This cannot be posted on social media, and this cannot be posted on, well, anywhere. It's going to be good for print in a smaller format if it's going to be nice and small, because it's not going to be possible to see those mistakes. But then one thing that I strongly advise you to avoid is 3-point perspective, because if your image is going to run into an issue, or let's say run into a point where you have to add this third vanishing line where the lines are meeting somewhere out there, if we have this kind of shot, it just means that it's not really okay. So avoid this. If you want to show that the room is big, do it the other way. Make sure to place the camera on a human level, make portrait mode, and show us the monumental view. Because right now, we can look at objects like this only in two situations. Either we're on a balcony or some kind of mezzanine, but it's going to be rather hard to imagine that because the image isn't really suggesting that. So if you would add some kind of railing here, a little bit blurred out, and we would be looking through it, that would be cool, because at that moment it would be a little bit easier for me to place myself. But I don't like to think about myself looking at something that I'm levitating. And this is also something that a lot of people will tell you, that this is just a little bit unrealistic because of the way you shot this image. Next thing that is a huge issue, and this is even bigger than the anti-aliasing, is that you're burning out elements in your shot, and there are some elements that are just too white to really see any detail. Please make sure to add a little bit of clamping to your lighting, and this can be easily done with Corona. I'm guessing you're using V-Ray and SketchUp, but it's probably just V-Ray in 3ds Max. But regardless, in 3ds Max, it's probably good to work with actually Corona, because Corona can be really easy when it can easily fix any kind of lighting situation, even if it's very difficult, because we've got multiple tools for that, but it can also be done with just a simple ACOT. Indians trying to, wait a second. Okay, sir, you are telling me a good source to texture, please. Good texture for a good source for textures, I would say I would test textures.com. Also, there are different websites that I cannot really name at the moment, but I will try to in a second. So allow me to just get back to you. So I'm going to show you something extraordinary since we've got that question. Let's see. I just need a few seconds before I get there. Okay, I cannot find it actually, so I'm very sorry for putting your hopes up, but I'm trying to get that. Okay, got it. So, this is not really well-known website, and this is something that I would say is amazing when it comes to quality. So they have approximately 5,000 textures, and you can really see that those are production ready. When it comes to textures, you're going to be able to download most of those assets, and they have very friendly plans for all of you. It's very similar to Megascans, but I would say they have some unique materials that Megascans could also think about, and we've got those cute chickens that nobody else has. So this is something that I would definitely recommend you. So Loot Pixel is a website that I would recommend recommend for textures, we are actually using this website. I am using this website, so definitely something to recommend. Have you tried? Wait a second. The new chat in on our YouTube is a little bit weird because of that heart. I need to disable it. Have you tried with Poly AI texture generator? Yeah, it's just not yet ready. It's not yet ready. So when it comes to images, this might not be as monumental as big, but Alfonso's, our student, was able to create a little bit more, I would say, in orderly composition, and this is something that your image really lacks. So composition and the rule of thirds really applies, and here we cannot really I know I'm not precise, but we're not looking at anything in particular, and everything is all over the place. So again, I would say composition is the biggest problem here. We can also list the carpet, but this is probably just part of the design, so I'm not going to be looking at that. But tell me, who does throw a carpet on their sofa? This is just too dense for a fur. Okay, so now we're going to go to Gilson's work, because this is one of the images that when you look at it, it's just good, and I love the fact that some of you are professionals and sent us some of really nicely done images, but fortunately for me, art is never finished, it is only abandoned. I don't know who said that, but it really struck me, because it's exactly how I feel about my 3D renders. You can always do something better, and you can see that this is a highly detailed and very good quality render, and there's not a lot of things that we can point towards. Although if we look at the carpet, it kind of suggests that we are lacking some kind of object in here that would allow us to really enjoy this image even more. So the coffee table or some kind of object, or at least different cropping, would be highly appreciated. Next thing that I would recommend you is lowering the distance between the individual planks. People pay money to have their planks set in such a way that no dirt is going to get in between them. This is let's say, considered a little bit of a mistake. Next thing that I can point towards, but this is only because I'm trying to show you mistakes, is the levitating sofa. I know it's on the carpet and that is why it's in the air, but how come your sofa is 5 centimeters above the ground, above this carpet? So this is really not going to be a good looks once you're finished. So you might have made a mistake where you've added the carpet a little bit too high, or maybe too deep or too dense, so it was 2 or 5 centimeters even, and then you aligned your sofa to the carpet, and because of that it's levitating so high above the ground that it kind of blows the effect. I love the textures, I love the materials, I love the amount of blur you've added into your image, or it's just very nicely rendered. The lighting is really realistic, and that's something that is super high quality. I love it. But at the same time, there are some mistakes, and you should fix those. On top of absolutely everything, in order to make this more lifelike, please remember to add something that's going to be alive. A plant, a cat, something that's going to suggest that this is actually not an image that was 3D produced, but actually something that's going to be well, more realistic. So even an onion on your counter would be okay, just so as long as it's going to be in the composition. Last thing, but this is just me being a little bit let's say annoying in this case, we've got texture repetition. You can see that those 3 dots form a constellation that is constant, and I'm not sure if it's a tile that was supposed to be repeating this way, but in my case, I would consider this a mistake. I'm not going to show you a counter example from my students because I think your image is really good, and fixing those small mistakes would pretty much mean that your image would be absolutely done. Sebastian Alvarez. So let's read a little bit of chat. What resolution texture would you be using if we render 4K images? Does 2K textures do the job? So that's a very good question, and thank you for that. So whenever we have some kind of object, right? Let's say this thing. Let's approximate that this whole part is going to be 500 pixels, right? So let's say that this is 500 pixels by 500 pixels in this case. So if we're going to be using the same quality texture, 500 by 500, due to the fact that our texture is going to be algorithmically blurred and some of the pixels are going to be needlessly emphasized, it is going to look bad. So what we should always think about is for, let's say, a 500 by 500, we need at least 1000 by 1000 pixel texture. That way, when it comes to anti-aliasing and different procedures from rendering engine, the rendering engine is going to literally have 9 pixels to work with to create one, but it's basically going to be the 8 pixels around the one that it's rendering, because it's going to have so much source to work with. The best possible scenario is at least twice as big texture for any objects that are going to be a little bit further in the background. But if the object is closer to your camera, you probably want to have even 4 times as big resolution, because otherwise you're going to run into some pixelation, some problematic resolution, and overall it is going to look bad. But Sebastian, this wasn't really about your image, because your image is really nice. I love the mood. It looks like a storm is coming or it's about to rain, so that is why we've got the mood going on, and this is something that is not very often seen, although we have to point to some elements that are really going to be against you. So first thing that really struck me in this image, or let's say it was something that I was almost, is the depth of field. It's not only too strong, but also it works in a little bit different manner than expected. So your depth of field ends around here. So all the elements are really blurred out only in this field, which is okay, but then again, everything else is sharp from this point now on. While in reality, we would be fixing our lens on some object here, and I would say that this distance compared to that distance, we would only focus on that object, and the objects in the background will also get a little bit of blur. On top of everything, there is no possibility that a lens exists that would give us this amount of blur only on a certain amount of, let's say, image. That could only suggest that this was artificially created, and it is going to be a giveaway. So be more subtle. Remember, special effects added to your images should be added, but the less you give them, the less power you give them, the better it is, because we always need to be as subtle as possible. What kind of facts do we need to consider to install the lighting source? So whenever you will be installing your light source, and this is also a topic that I wanted to talk about in regards to this image, is that when you place your light source, you have to take into consideration what it is actually going to be cast upon. So the lighting is always going to be complementary to your details. So sometimes adding even a fake light or moving the sun, in your case, I would move the sun further to the left, somewhere out here. Once it would be in that position, I would allow it to shine through those leaves, so they would be way brighter. We can see that this tree is, overall, your trees are extremely dark. I would definitely recommend you to work on that. change the textures, work a little bit more on the materials, and add a little bit of translucency, because this is not going to be a good looks in the end. And comparing this to work of one of our students, when you want a stormy weather, go for it. Don't pretend that the storm is coming. Make sure that we've got a little bit of depth of field, just like in this case, but with quality comes the elegance, and you want to make sure that everything in your shot is going to be high quality models, textures, and even the special effects. So if you will add a little bit stronger lighting and just be aggressive about it, it would look so much better. This shot alone, beautiful, but only this element, because once we zoom out, you're going to notice that we've got a lot of repetition, some elements are lower quality, blur is inconsistent, we have a texture repetition in on all of the surfaces, especially in the reflection zone. This is something that I highly recommend you to work on. And then we're lacking the light. There's just this area, not so interesting. This area, very interesting indeed, very interesting, although the light doesn't really tell us any story. This effect, what we have here, is exactly what your image needs more. You must be a little bit more aggressive with your lighting, and you have to add a little bit more power to it. And last but not least is oversaturation of many materials. This brown bark of this plant is just weird. Compared to any other color, it's just not working. Sebastian, your work is really fantastic, and some tweaks and you're going to be a professional soon. I also recommend you to consider our training, because this is something that you might want to consider, due to the fact that you might polish your skills in order to get a little bit better, but it's up to you. Pedro, now it's your turn. So we've got this image, and I must say I love this design. It has a lot of very interesting elements in it, and this is something that you don't see every day, but we're going to talk about it in a second. The ceiling looks like a concrete floor, by the way. What kind of facts do we need to consider? It does have a charm too, but I haven't seen much ceiling before. Sir, what's the best lighting? Actually, sir, I have tried the Real Project 3D Casa Carlando. Please review it. If I'm going to be able to, we will. I don't see anyone online in the chat whose visualization is chosen to review. I would say that it's actually something that is a little bit underwhelming for me as well. Can I send one more render for some project? I would really like your opinion. I'm also looking at that seat at VizAcademy. I need to improve my exterior lighting. Stenica, I would say that unfortunately we don't take new applications for that review, because we already have that part closed. But if you will send me that image to info@VizAcademy, we might look at it and ask a few questions about our training along the way. It's going to help us give you the review. You're welcome to send us your work if you want to. How do you make sure that the scatter plants don't have leaves sticking into other objects? Toon, you really can't do that, because it's impossible when using scattering methods. So you have to make sure to render, test, and if needed, rotate, move, delete elements by hand. Corona Renderer allows you to work with individual elements in the scatter, so that is going to be your answer. If you see a problem, you have to fix it, but you cannot really predict it, so you will always have to react instead of just preemptively make sure that something doesn't get any kind of objects sticking into it. Awesome feedback. Thank you, Mike. I will definitely consider it. Thank you. Sir, what's the best... oh, Sebastian, you actually are online. Thank you. That's cool. So finally, somebody is in the chat whose work I'm reviewing. Payal, sir, what's the best lighting for interior scene? I've already answered your question, Payal. So It would be nice if you would listen. ArtViz Belgium. Hello from Belgium. I figured that you must be from Belgium. Hello and welcome. So have you sent anything to us? And what kind of ArtViz do you work with? I mean, 3ds Max, Corona, V-Ray, SketchUp. So Pedro, let's talk about your work. Can I send more than one render of some project? I would really like your opinion. I'm also looking at taking a seat at VizAcademy. I need to improve on exterior lighting. Alan. So Alan, I cannot stop you from sending me more images, and I promise I will get back to you as soon as I look into the emails. Just make sure to add something like to Mike, so you can be sure that I will answer it. So Pedro, about your work. So I absolutely love this design, but there are always some elements to improve. The first thing that you have to work on is the depth of field. Although it's really looking good, if we want to use it, we have to focus on something. So you would have to focus on one element and blur out the rest a little bit. So let's say zooming in like this, show us the sofa, rest could be slightly blurred out. But if you're making a very wide shot that is supposedly focusing on some area and the rest is blurred out, this is not the depth of field we really want and appreciate. If this would be possible, or if it would be real, you would have to get slightly lower values, because in this case the focus on one element wouldn't necessarily blur out the rest as much as it did in your case. Next thing that is really a huge element is that you oversaturated your floor. So although this is the color you wanted, and I understand that, but because of the level of saturation in your case, the image struck by sunlight is bleeding heavily onto the ceiling. Everything has a sepia look because of that. The contrast is lost because a lot of light is pouring in and we have too much, or the lighting is too overwhelming. And to add insult to the injury, I would say, we also have this very, very, very strong light inside during a daylight, which is not necessarily a good idea. Sometimes less is more. So suggesting that we've got those lamps but not turning them on would be a better idea, because then there would be more shadows to work with, and not everything and not all elements would be orange. Right now, this is the biggest problem I have with this image. So the depth of field and the color bleed that is a little bit too aggressive. Turning on the lights in the back side of your render is a very good idea, because it's also going to add a bit of contrast. But then again, we already have almost the same level of lighting on the right side, which is directly struck by the sun, and the opposite side where the shadow is just blunt because of all of the lamps. Next thing is the quality of models you're using. A lot of models in your scene are good, but some of them, especially the plants, are too low quality. You have to consider changing those. The light bulbs aren't really that good looking. I mean, the material wise, they just don't work. And also those baskets. You can see that this is exactly the same basket copied over and over again, and you can also see some repetition. Our brains are hardwired to look for patterns, and if you have some kind of objects that repeat and you have some kind of patterns that you can point towards, it is going to be something that your viewers are just not going to like. So this is something that you have to work on. And metals. When it comes to metals, no metal, even no matter how well cut, using lasers or whatnot, is never going to have this kind of perfect reflection. There's always going to be some kind of additional wobble, some additional change, some imperfection. And right now, what you did is you created perfectly flat surfaces that have no real life, let's say, reflection. It's just weird. So allow me to show you what I mean. In many cases, if we have metallic coffee tables or objects, you're always going to see that metal is always going to have a little bit, let's say, weird and structure where everything is going to be, you know what, let's go for Chrome coffee table. Maybe that's going to make more sense. Oh, this is actually good, but this is what I'm talking about. So when you have metal, you can see that this is supposedly just a box, right? But if you look closely at this object, the wobble or the reflection is imperfect. This is the carpet part, but look how much it is distorted. This one wobble. This kind of distortion is always going to be present on metallic objects. And this is something you have to take into consideration, that adding a little bit of that by any means, is it going to be a noise in your bump or noise on the object, a little bit more topology, or just simply messing it up in a post, it is going to be something expected, because even this the perfect metal is always going to have that effect where some corners are always going to be a bit rounded up so people don't cut their fingers on it. So this is always going to also add a little bit more reflection to the object, so it would be more shiny, just like jewelry. And this is almost the same effect you have almost added in this area, but it's just a little bit of a coincidence and not something you planned for. So this is what I would suggest to you, but definitely a lot of things can be also said about this. For example, bump in your case is a little bit too strong, but overall I loved this design. Comparing this to Jan's Sigurd work by what this is somewhat similar vibe that I'm getting from this image, and what we're working with is also almost monochrome lighting with a lot of warmth in it, but at the same time we have plenty of contrast. You know where the front and back of an object is. You can see some beautiful reflections, shininess, and most importantly, the plants are very high quality, and you can see that all of them form composition that really just looks good and feels good to your eye. This is one of those images that I would call an eye candy. And Jan, very good job. Also, Pedro, amazing work. So let's see what else we have. So we've got Salid Ahmad work. So this is one of those images that is very peculiar, because at one hand, we've got extremely high quality, so the stones, the elements, the scattered objects are good. The background is fine, but the composition is also okay. But the lack of contrast is just mind-boggling. This is something that really struck me, because we can see that sand goes a little bit higher, but then you decided to plant some carrots around here, or I don't know, Skittles, and this doesn't look that good. The colors aren't fitting this composition. Also, the composition lacks contrast, and due to that, it could be better. And I know that this is a beautiful image. We always need to emphasize the object that we really want to work with. High quality scattered objects, rocks, is always going to be a plus, and this is something you should always look out for. Making sure that the surfaces are nice, smooth, rendered to very low noise levels, and especially adding some contrast, because in your case, I'm guessing that the building was supposed to be important, but from the composition, I think the rock is the most important part, or this log, and it kind of looks like a squid, and I'm not sure if this was intentional. Okay, this was wrong. I'm not sure if this was intentional, but we've got this very nice eye around here, so this could be a very nice idea to add some extra into it. But really, this is just me imagining things. This is really going to be an amazing render if you allow it, if you're going to spend a few hours with it. So guys, we went through 10 propositions so far. I'm going to try to look for more images from you guys, so allow me to look for those. 1 second. We already have most of those images closed, and it's going to be best to check if we've got some kind of extras waiting for us. I'm just checking if my team is going to send me some new images at the moment. And we've got some rogue cards. So this is work by Asim, and since Asim is our fan for a long time, I'm going to review this as an extra because I only planned for 10 images, but we're going to talk about this one as well. So again, we've got the birdies. So this is something that always will be present on renders by people that are, let's say, beginners, but it doesn't mean that they're bad. It's just that you can add them, but never emphasize them. There should be somewhere out there in the background, but since they are going to be that small, why add them in the first place? And also, a little bit of blur on those birds wouldn't hurt. So let's start. I like this. I like the fact that you've added this car into your render, but there's no driver, the lights are on, and it's not moving, and it's in the middle of the road. That's something you have to always consider, that your renders need to make sense before you really allow them. Oh, there's more birds. So next thing is the repetition. We've got a lot of plant repetition, which again is going to mean that this is 3D for sure. The textures that you use are very high quality, although we also have repetition. So this is something you have to work on. You have to work with different textures or randomization. Otherwise, it's just going to be, yeah, I can see that this is 3D. The green walls, fine, we've got everything we needed, but you definitely need to work a little bit more. Again, we've got exactly the same plant 10,000 times. The green color of all of your plants is so different on all of those elements that it doesn't fit the composition. So what I mean here is that you have to make sure that we either go with green closer to blue or closer to yellow, but you've got blue and yellow greens at the same time, which means that this is going to be a little bit of a cacophony composition wise. Again, it's going to boil down to randomizing your textures. You can see patterns forming, the lines aren't really your friend. We have a little bit of gamma randomization, but we don't have mapping randomization, so that shows in this area, birdies. So beautiful ornaments that you've added, the plants are quite fine, but then if we really want to look at the details, you should add some kind of additional bush in this area, because that's going to be something that will help you work with your image a little bit further. At the moment, you kind of show, if you wouldn't add so many trees or at least work with this area, we would be able to pretend that this is a lake, but it's not, and that is why we have a little bit of a problem. Although I must say that this is a very nice image, and it's definitely not that bad. We've got two versions of your work and one with your phone number, so I would say both are very fine, and we can see that a little bit of changes were added. So we also have plenty of more images sent by you, but unfortunately I'm not going to be able to review all of them, but some of your renders are just amazing, and I would like you to still keep in touch with us, because it's really nice to have such an amazing render sent towards us, but we had to pick a few of your works to talk about, and I wanted to make sure that the topics aren't going to be the same all the time. Better lighting, thank you, bye-bye. But we also need to take into consideration that not everybody is working solely with just ArcViz. Some of the works were absolute artworks, and I recognize some of the assets even, but this is something that I would say is worth mentioning, and it would be a shame not to point towards your work, because I highly appreciate you all for sending your work towards us for a review. I know that this takes a lot of guts to send your work to somebody else for a review, especially if you don't know that person. So I again would like to thank you and congratulate everybody who sent us their work, because there's plenty of it. So again, I couldn't review all, but we will be making this periodically. So in a couple of weeks, we're going to do another review and maybe a small contest for everybody. So guys, I would say this is it for today, but I'm still going to try to read our chat to just make sure that I don't miss out on any good questions. So Okay, so just sent Google form. Hello, sir. Hi from Belgium too. Hello. Hello from Istanbul. Hello from Corona. I'm using Corona, you meant. Okay. Oh, it was you! I'm also wanted to send. I just sent it. Hi, this is the first time I watch your live and you are brilliant. My question is, where can I get inspiration from for my design for compositions? You should test yourself. I mean, check images, look for images that you like on Pinterest, Art Daily. Avoid Behance and ArtStation, because those are going to be done by other professionals and 3D. You want to look for photos to look for the composition, to learn. I kinda have my dirty secret. I am an absolute fan of IKEA catalogs. I collect them, so I love their composition. IKEA makes 80 to 90% of their catalogs in 3ds Max, V-Ray Corona. So this is something to really think about, and I love it because it's impossible to tell in most of the cases, especially if you don't know that this is a 3D render. So definitely look for those sources. Rude, can this image be helped with an extra texture element with occlusion? Yes, in many cases it can be helped that way, but it is going to be best to add a randomization if we're referring to the last image. I just sent it one now. Email from Harash Patel. Was waiting so long for this live, sir. Reviews, sir. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to get new stuff into our stock if it's not here. I am not able to access it at the moment. I'm very sorry for that, but you're going to have your chance the next time. Thank you, Mike, so much. I will work on that advice. Are people modeling everything or using lots of assets? I would say SPN is probably a mix of both. Sometimes you have to model, sometimes you have to render. You have to download. For example, if we look at this bed, it was more than likely downloaded. But when it comes to the rails, the TV, the leaves, and probably some of the furniture in the background, although not the clothing, it was probably all modeled. So this is something that you have to consider, that not everything has to be modeled. If you can cut corners, do it, as long as you're not lowering the quality. By the way, guys, I love this image. It's really amazing. So whoever made it, congratulations. It's a very nice image by Xiao. So Xiao, shout out to you. An honorable mention, I would say. Thank you so much. Are you people modeling? Right side second row, mine render. Hey, congrats. Nice. Now both bedrooms are high. A very useful tip. Thank you very much. I just modeled all of our furniture to have an extra copy of our house. Hello, Mike. Is Cycles viable for professional work? Yes, it is, but Cycles is probably going to be replaced with better solutions soon in Blender, because Blender is very, let's say, aggressively developing. But compared to Cycles, I prefer Eve because it's just easier and just faster, in my opinion. Hi from Israel, my first time. Zhao, you just came in to the very last minute of our webinar. Still hello, nice to have you. I'm very glad to have audience in that part of the world. But this is it for today. Thank you very much again to all of you that decided to participate. I highly appreciate all of you sending your work. Make sure to send us more the next time. We're going to make sure to do a broader promotion of this event because I think it's a success. At the same time, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It really helps us to even get a 3-word comment, because this helps us against the algorithm. I know it's YouTuber talk, but I have to do it because you guys need to put in those likes. They will really help us. They will allow us to make those webinars more often, bigger, and better. So once again, thank you, and see you next time. Bye-bye.